We've done this for 2 weeks, and we did it the right way every day. Every day.
I can't believe Alec Baldwin was holding the gun. That's so
It's a real gun. It's a real gun.
Alec Baldwin is headed to trial for manslaughter after a bullet fired from the gun he was holding on the set of his film Rust killed the movie's cinematographer and wounded the director. And as the prosecution and defense do their final preparations, we're taking a closer look at some specific evidence that we might see during this high-profile trial. The interviews with the film's biggest players right after the accident. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Actor Alec Baldwin's involuntary manslaughter trial is getting underway in New Mexico, nearly 3 years after a cinematographer, Halyna Hutchins, was killed on the film set of the low-budget movie Rust. We know that the gun that Alec Baldwin was holding went off, sending a live bullet flying through Hutchins into director Joel Souza, who survived. Hutchins, unfortunately, did not. Baldwin has since said in interviews that he did not pull the trigger of the gun, that instead it somehow just went off. Forensic experts have disagreed, saying there's no way for the gun to fire without the trigger being pulled. In fact, the FBI tested the gun, and in order to get the gun to go off during that testing without pulling the trigger, they actually had to break the gun, which, as you can imagine, is something that will be a main focus for the defense, right? Because how can we know for sure if the gun malfunctioned if we can't properly test it? Now, speaking of evidence and arguments, we want to explore something very specific. We want to explore key interviews in this case that could make their way into this trial. Now, before we do, huge update in this trial, in this case that we have to talk about. Alec Baldwin just scored a major legal victory. You see, one of the arguments that prosecutors were relying on presenting to this jury, that Baldwin was not just an actor on the film, but he was a producer of the film and therefore had an added layer of responsibility, knowledge, control over what was happening on the set. He is more to blame for what happened. However, unfortunately for the prosecution, Judge Marlo Summer said, not so fast. You cannot present evidence of Alec Baldwin as a producer to support your theory that he is criminally liable. The judge said, I'm having real difficulty with the state's position that they want to show that as a producer, he didn't follow guidelines, and therefore as an actor, Mr. Baldwin did all these things wrong, resulting in the death of Halyna Hutchins, because as a producer, he allowed all this to happen. The probative value is not substantially outweighed by unfair prejudice and certainly confusion of issues to the jury, so I'm denying evidence of his status as a producer. The judge explained that there were other producers on the film too. It wasn't just in Baldwin's hands, so he can't be proven to be responsible for all that was happening. So he'll be judged as an actor, not as a producer. That is a big loss for the prosecution on the eve of trial. Now, to be clear, there is some important evidence that can certainly come in about how he was handling the weapon on the day of the shooting, how he was handling the weapon on past incidents, because the prosecution has alleged that Baldwin was using the weapon as a pointer, that he fired it after cut was yelled, that he placed his finger on the trigger during times when it didn't call for that to happen, that he was cocking and decocking the gun, firing blanks at the direction of crew members. Now, the judge did say that she would not allow videos of Alec Baldwin yelling or screaming at people on the set. Again, big loss for the prosecution because they were hoping that they could show he was the boss, that he was creating a tense, unsafe working environment where things could slip up. But the judge said that would not be relevant. Now, with that in mind, we want to get into some videos that, again, could be very pivotal pieces of evidence in this case. So when first responders and law enforcement arrive at this absolutely chaotic scene outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico, they tried to piece together a timeline of what happened and who was involved. And once investigators determined that Alec Baldwin was the one holding the gun and Halyna Gutierrez-Reed was the film's armorer, they interviewed both of them at the police station the same day as the shooting. So Baldwin, he changed out of his costume, he met detectives to discuss what happened. He explained that there should never be live bullets inside of a prop gun, and he said that even if there had been a dummy round or blank inside the gun, it would have made a loud noise, but it wouldn't have caused grave injury to anyone nearby. But Baldwin also pointed out that he expected the gun to be empty of ammunition when it was handed to him. Take a listen.
If you decide to answer any questions now with or without a lawyer, you have the right to stop questioning at any time or to stop questioning for the purpose of consulting a lawyer.
So my only question is, am I being charged with something?
No, we're just interviewing.
I don't, that's what
But
I'm not worried because I'm not, yeah.
We
But
have to do
you're charging
our
me with
job
something.
at
Yeah, no, just tell me that.
advising you your rights
You want me to write my
because
name here?
this is an investigation.
Yeah.
Just a formality. You have to do it, you're here,
You
we
do
appreciate
you do
it.
whatever you want to do. What is today?
It is the 21st of October.
Oh.
Long day?
Well, what's interesting, not to digress on some commentary here, is that we've done this for 2 weeks and we did it the right way every day. Every day. You're on a set, you rehearse, they bring you what's called a cold gun. The gun is either completely empty, the chambers, or there is a cosmetic piece. So for example, if you're the camera, and this is going to sound silly and specific, but if I'm pointing a gun close to the camera, you want to see into the cylinder that there's material in there, cosmetic material. So those rounds are cosmetic rounds.
Right.
They put them in, and you rehearse, or even in a shot when you don't fire. I pull the gun up and you see there's some material inside the cylinder. They'd hand me a cold gun, no charges. They always hand you a cold gun with nothing in it to rehearse. And then, when you shoot, and if you are shooting loads that are flash loads, and they're usually in 3 denominations, quarter, half, or full load rounds, so that the flash is bright, and the sound is loud, louder, loudest. Full load is loudest. So if you're outside, you want a full load, bang, you want a loud sound. If you're inside, you can do a quarter load. Right before you shoot, everyone preps, crew puts the earplugs in, some put headphones on, the camera's there, very often there's a loose, tight screen, but you're the camera operator and there's the camera, so I should always shoot off camera, you never shoot into the lens. And you shoot, and there's a flash and a sound. Now, I went to lunch, she disarmed me. I sat down.
She being?
Hannah, the armaments person. She was always handling the guns, or 99% of the time. So I would, if I had a cosmetic rifle with no rounds, I'd hand it to one of her assistants. I'm sitting there, she disarms me, we go to lunch, we come back from lunch, and they hand me the revolver, the Colt.
And I just like the
Her.
name, it's Hannah again.
They arm me, and you're assuming, as we've done every time, that it's a cold gun for the rehearsal. And I put the gag in the shot, you're the camera, because I have a coat, and I have a holster, and I pull the coat over, and I kind of cup my hands like I folded my hands. And then I'm going to slowly sneak the revolver, the Colt out, and turn and shoot these other guys, or try to shoot them. I take the coat over the thing, I think the camera's there. I believe, my recollection is she was there, turned a bit, like talking to him. So I think she was hit in the right armpit. But this is all I know, and that is that I take the gun out in the rehearsal. He wants it very dramatic and very slow. I'm trying to sneak up on them. I take the gun out, and as I take, like as it clears, as the barrel clears the hole, turn and cock the gun over here. I turn and cock the gun goes off. It's supposed to be a cold gun. Nothing. No flash charges, nothing. Now, this is a puzzle to me, and this is making me very emotional now, you know. But in my time, and I'm older now, but when I was younger and I was shooting guns in films, I've never seen a theatrical flash round where the material went through someone's armpit, came out their body, and hit somebody else in the shoulder.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if your department is prepared to go find out what comes out of his shoulder surgically. Is that a live round?
That's what we are actually looking at.
Is that a lot? Because it doesn't make any sense otherwise.
Yeah.
It hits her in the armpit, comes out her shoulder, goes into his shoulder, and he just told me on the phone, I talked to Joel. He said they showed me the x-ray, and the shape of the thing in my shoulder is the shape of a bullet.
Now, based on that, I imagine prosecutors could suggest or argue that Alec Baldwin was an experienced, trained actor. He knew right from wrong when it came to firearms on set. And throughout the interview, Baldwin talked about various protocols when it came to on-set safety and even praised Halyna Gutierrez-Reed and her assistants for doing a good job making sure weapons were handled appropriately.
I've never heard of anything like this in my life, ever.
Okay.
I've never heard of a projectile coming out of a prop gun that went through a person's body, regardless of her being a smaller woman. That the bullet went in here, I'm told, went in here, came out here, her shoulder or whatever, and went into his body. I've never heard of that in my life. I don't know of any projectile in a gun, in a flash prop gun, that could accomplish that. Now, if somebody put a live round in there accidentally, see, a very important question for Hannah is, have you ever commingled live rounds with theatrical rounds in your kit? Because they're forbidden to do that. According to, I think, the union rules and the safety rules for all the unions, you're not allowed to do that because of the fear of what will happen that you commingle. So whether someone accidentally, and I can't even imagine this, deliberately placed a live round in that gun, I've never heard of that in my life, and I don't know anything about what happened, but all I know is when see, the other thing about this is, in a live round, you'd have a recoil, usually. When I shot that gun and it went off, I didn't shoot it when it went off. I didn't intend for it for what happened to happen. When that happens I'm always told, but because I'm not a gun person, I don't own a gun, they've always told me, they asked me to simulate the recoil. When I shoot the Colt, which is a big gun, 45 caliber bullet, they always teach me when we go action. I go, get back here, boom, and they make me take my hand and go boom and have the kick, because there's no kick in a flash round.
Okay.
And when this happened, I don't recall there being any kick either. That's important.
Okay.
Everybody was sick that this happened because we didn't know. No one imagined. Everyone thought she was hit by wadding or she got burned. No one presumed she was shot with a bullet. Any projectile went through her body. No one even considered that wasn't possible. So the question is, the cartridge that came out, the cartridge is in the gun that they fired. Have you got that?
No.
So we have to send that. We don't analyze that stuff. We collect it, but then we send it to lab.
It was
to
collected.
analyze.
You have
It will be.
Right. That's all I'm saying. Is that to me, I'm wondering, what was that? What was in that? They're measuring. I don't know anything about that. What are they? What ballistics? How can they measure what was in that? How much of it?
And that'll all be done at the lab.
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is the gun went off, she hit the floor, he hit the floor, he started screaming. He was in a lot of pain. She went into shock. She didn't talk.
Right.
Her eyes are rolling back in her head, and blah, 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 and bad. And everybody starts getting really, and then they start doing CPR, and everybody gets really panicky. And then people start wondering, what, did something, we assumed, because the wadding can burn you, there's material that can come out under that, very rarely, that could burn you. But remember, that often doesn't happen because there's always a cold gun on the rehearsal. By the time you leave, if the wadding comes out and it hits somebody, they're 20 feet away from you. In a gunfight, the crew is away. You're not shooting anybody near the crew. And my point is that when she went down, I thought, what was stuck? We all said the same thing. What was stuck in the barrel? Was something left? They didn't clean the barrel, which they always do, always. And was there a rock or something that went through her body? I didn't know about the passing through her body. I know she was hit. I didn't know where, and I don't know to what extent. But we all presumed, as we're sitting outside, bullshitting for the last 2 hours while this went on, the aftermath, we assumed something was lodged in the barrel, was a projectile that went into her body. Now, when you tell me that's what came out of Joel's shoulder, that's a faulty round, which I've never heard of that before.
Okay.
Never. I've never heard of a theatrical flash round that was loaded into a gun that had a projectile that misfired, and that projectile came out that was a lethal round. Normally, if you're going to have a round that has this on it, it's the material that disintegrates when you fire the gun. Because if you take a flash round with gunpowder in it, whether it's a quarter, half, or full load, and you put a real bullet on, that's called a bullet. That's not a movie bullet. That's a bullet.
Yeah.
How did that happen? I mean, I'm the person that fired the gun.
Now, Baldwin's defense, I imagine, will surely put the blame on Halyna Gutierrez-Reed, who, by the way, was convicted, right? That it was her responsibility to ensure we had a cold gun on set. It wasn't mine. I'm just the actor. No idea this would happen. No indication this would ever happen. But again, the difficulty for Alec Baldwin could be if they can prove he did pull the trigger when he said he didn't and when he shouldn't have, and acted in a way that was consistent with his past alleged behavior of horseplaying with the weapon, that could be very, very problematic for him in this case. And of course, the question becomes, did he not attend or pay attention during the required trainings, firearms trainings, and so forth? And when we say, by the way, involuntary manslaughter, we're talking recklessness or criminal negligence. And my understanding is there are two theories by which the jury could find Alec Baldwin guilty: that he negligently handled the firearm, or he acted without due caution or circumspection in that he committed an act with total disregard or indifference for the safety of others. And remember, the accusation is that he pulled the trigger during a rehearsal when it wasn't necessary for him to have a real weapon, let alone pull the trigger, and especially when the armor wasn't around. Yeah, Halyna Gutierrez-Reed wasn't in that church where the shooting happened. Now, at the end of the interview, the detectives delivered this horrible news that Halyna Hutchins was dead. Watch Baldwin's reaction.
I do have some very unfortunate news to tell you.
What?
She didn't make it. Yeah. So Joel's still at the hospital, but the other person involved didn't make it. Sorry. I just didn't want you to hear it outside of here.
Is there something we could do for you? Is that Jonah in there?
What?
Jonah, the one back there?
Yeah,
Okay. Would you want Jonah in here with you? What do you want to do? Do you want to make a call?
you can sit.
We should go.
I don't think there's an argument there that he was genuinely in shock. Now, let's talk about Halyna Gutierrez-Reed, this young armor who is now 26. She was also interviewed, and clips of the interrogation were played at her own involuntary manslaughter trial earlier this year. As I mentioned, Gutierrez-Reed was able to give the detectives more information about the ammunition on set, how the ammo was stored, how she was able to tell the prop bullets from real bullets. Take a listen.
How long have you been doing this? Because you mentioned you've been on multiple sets.
Since about March, but I've been handling guns my whole life, pretty much.
So you're very familiar with guns. And this is your primary function. You go to different sets and you primarily handle these guns.
Yeah.
Okay. So, can you tell us what happened today? When you started work, when you got there to work?
Yeah, I went to work. We got the guns out.
Who's we?
Me, my coworker Sarah, she helped me with the guns a little bit too. Yeah. And we got the guns out, we went to set. We had the guns on set. I dummied the guns up with the dummy rounds. And yeah, we were on set all day. No, nothing happened. And then we came back from lunch and that happened.
Okay. So you got on set with the gun, with the dummy rounds about what time?
Like 7:30 probably.
Around 7:30 this morning?
Yeah. I didn't dummy the gun up until about a little before lunch, like an hour before lunch.
You put the gun before going to lunch back in the safe?
Yeah.
But the blanks and dummies were left on the cart?
Yeah.
Did you, when you got back, did they look moved or tampered with or touched when you got back from lunch?
They did not. No, nothing seemed out of the ordinary.
Okay.
Was the gun still in the safe after lunch?
Yeah.
Who pulled it out?
Sarah pulled it out and she handed it to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you watched her?
Yeah.
Where I'm trying to get with is because you can handle the gun, you obviously are going to be loading the gun, so that's why I'm concerned about the dummy and the blanks, because those were left out. And is there some way that somebody can alter them to make them still look like your dummy rounds?
Well, so that's the thing, is that like bullets, like real bullets, pretty much look the same as dummies. The only difference is the rattle.
And when the detectives asked Gutierrez-Reed about the incident on set, she told them she wasn't inside the small church, again, where the scene was being filmed, but she quickly realized something was wrong.
What do you remember about?
Basically, I just we had a couple of, we had a popper pop last week. The poppers are for special effects. One just went off randomly last week, so I was like, oh, it must be a popper. And I checked all of them myself, so I heard the shot, and Sarah was like, what was that? And I was like, must have been a popper, and I turned around, and then I heard them say medic emergency, and I was like, what the And then I checked in, and I looked, and I saw Alec on the ground, and I was like, oh, not Alec, Joel, and I was like, what the was it, the gun? And Dave was like, yeah, it was a gun. And so I was like, I walked in, and I tried to see what was happening, or where the gun was, to secure the weapons on set. And I got yelled at, and I ran out, and Dave brought me the gun, and I opened the gun up, and one of the dummies somehow had been discharged.
And can you kind of explain a little bit more what you mean by that it was discharged?
So if I had a bullet, wait, I have some dummies. So, right, check these out. I wish it had just been one of these. But see how these have the hole?
Okay.
And this one doesn't have a primer, right? And most of them, they have the primers, but the primers aren't hot. I've never had one with a hot primer before.
Okay.
So that seems pretty weird to me. But so basically, this part, when a bullet shoots, the fire projects it, and this comes out, this little piece right here, this little nipple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so when I had checked the gun, this part, that was gone.
Did you get to see the shell?
I saw the shell, yeah, and it's on the thing.
Did it have one of the? Did it look like this, or was it different?
It didn't have the hole. It didn't have that. So it had that, and it didn't have the hole. And this was gone. So it was just the shell.
So it kind of looked
Just the cartridge.
just the regular cartridge when it
Without
shot.
this. Yeah.
So these ones are dummy or because they have the hole.
Yeah.
So that one didn't have a hole. So it looked like a realistic one when you saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Are you aware of a time or know if something like that can be dysfunctional or?
Overall, these are some weird, what we're dealing with are explosives. There's always a chance of safety to be compromised, and that's the issue, and that's what I'm supposed to watch out for on set, and yeah.
Gutierrez-Reed, and nearly 3 weeks later, Gutierrez-Reed was back in the interrogation room, this time with her lawyer.
So you hand the gun to Dave, and then did you see what he did with it at that point?
At that point, he was just sitting in with it and not moving it at all.
Just holding it.
Just holding it.
Okay.
And his finger wasn't in the trigger guard or anything.
Obviously this gun goes in Alec's bandolier, does cross-draw with it.
Yeah. Which I was already worried about that because he hadn't really trained with that much.
Okay.
Yeah, I texted his assistant the night before and wanted to make sure that he was comfortable with that, but they said that he was fine and that, they were going to figure it out and stuff. So,
do you have that text message still?
Yeah.
As I mentioned, Halyna Gutierrez-Reed went on trial, and her manslaughter trial took place in February and March of 2024, and multiple people testified who were at the set that day, some for the prosecution, others for the defense. Gutierrez-Reed, in the end, was convicted of involuntary manslaughter for Halyna's death. She was sentenced to spend 18 months at the New Mexico Women's Correctional Facility. This is the maximum sentence under the law. Her legal team said that they plan to appeal that conviction. And part of Gutierrez-Reed's defense strategy was to talk about how the production was being run. Her attorney said that the young armorer was not very experienced. She was given dual duties of both the armorer and a prop person. She was spread thin. It was impossible for her to do her job to make sure everything was safe. The defense also brought up issues like unsafe working conditions, which brings me to another big piece of information revealed during these police interviews, that a half a dozen camera operators and their assistants walked off the set. This was before Baldwin pulled out his prop gun to practice the scene. And something else important happened. There were reports that they wrote letters of resignation the night before and staged the walkout early on the morning of October 21st. One of the other lead actors in Rust, Jensen Ackles from Supernatural and The Boys, he ended up leaving the production once it was put on hold, and he talked about the walkout delaying the start of filming when he spoke with detectives.
So that day, that particular day, morning went per usual. We were shooting up at the church. Actually, we shot some other stuff the morning of. We had a slight delay in the morning. In fact, so much so that we got loaded up into a van at base camp and we're headed to set. And they turned the van around. They were like, "Wait, we're not ready for you. Turn, like, everybody go back to base camp, the cast." And I heard that on the radio. I was like, "What the fuck? Like, that's weird. Like, maybe they had a camera, a lens issue, or the light wasn't right. But at least bring us up there. It's not going to be. It's going to be a 10-minute fix, whatever it is." Little did I know that it was the camera crew that was walking because they weren't. I mean, this is what I heard that morning from the producers, because I went in and I was like, "Yo, what's happening?" And they were like, "A camera is walking because we will put them up." I'm like, "Put them up where? What do you mean?" They're like, "Well, they're set up in Albuquerque. They want to be in Santa Fe because it's a longer commute, it's less of a commute. They want a lesser commute. It's in the contract that they don't get that. They're still in the zone. And if we do it for them, then we have to do it for all of the departments, and we don't have that in the budget. It's a small budget movie." So they threatened to walk, and they walked. And I was like, "Well, when did they threaten to walk?" They were like, "This morning." They waited until like one of our busiest days when we have a big giant shootout. They knew we were just coming off a 2-day break. They could have said it. They could have done it like 2 days prior, given production 2 days to find replacements. Mm-hmm. But they didn't. They were smart. They're negotiating, and they showed up that morning with their equipment. They were like, "So, you gonna put us up?" And production was like, "No, we told you no." And they're like, "Okay, bye." And that's why they were like, "Send cast back to base camp. We don't have a camera crew right now."
It'll certainly be a question of whether or not that particular interview will come into evidence here, but I'll tell you what, Halyna Gutierrez-Reed dropped that bombshell on detectives in her interview as well.
Was there anything that stuck out of the ordinary today to you?
No, I mean, just the whole camera crew quit. That's all. So we were like super behind and everything.
When did the camera crew quit?
Yesterday.
So is there a reason?
I don't know.
Okay,
I don't think that they would be involved in that.
Well,
yeah.
Is there because maybe people were disgruntled?
Oh, there was some bickering, but I don't. Yeah, I highly doubt that they were able to switch any rounds, and especially getting a 45 round is like stupid hard right now.
Mm-hmm.
And at least, yeah.
Was there any of that towards Joel, or did anybody have any issues with Joel, and what was the other one?
I don't believe anyone had issues with Joel.
Okay. What was
Halyna. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know too much about her. She's definitely a strong personality, that's all.
Mm-hmm. But there's nobody that you could think of that might have any anger?
I couldn't really say that anyone would be, like, that angry. Like, you know, we're on a film set. Everybody's always off at each other a little bit. Work together for 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, you know?
Yeah.
It's hard to not beef with people a little bit.
Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting that the whole camera crew quit yesterday, and then
That is pretty
something happens like this today. Would somebody want to maybe or they could even have an issue without you. If somebody wants to disrupt the filming of this movie, is that something that you could think of?
I don't know. I can't really say for sure, and I wouldn't want to think that about anybody on that set personally.
You really don't want to think that about anybody.
Never.
But
no.
unfortunately,
yeah, I can't think of like any one person. I couldn't really think of a situation that would require like, you know, I don't know, almost killing somebody.
Well, I mean, it happened. I mean,
Yeah.
you keep mentioning it was The Crow when that happened.
Yeah, that was scary,
So,
man.
These things happen with somebody.
I know, I can't believe I'm like the last thing like this to happen since The Crow.
And
my own worst nightmare.
unfortunately, well, I think right now they're good, but again, that's why, unfortunately, they're right away like, oh, it's the person who is in charge of all these.
Totally.
And that's why we wanted to talk to you, was one of
Yeah.
the main ones, because, yeah, you're in charge of it, but that's also why would you put yourself in that predicament?
Yeah.
You know, so would it be possible?
Yeah. I don't know. I think maybe there was just perhaps a bad round in that box.
Well, a couple of bad rounds.
Possibly.
Because there wasn't one round that went off.
What? There was one, right?
How did
Because
two people get shot?
No, so there was only one round that went off, and I must have went through Joel somehow and hit Halyna, and I'm like flabbergasted by this. I can't fucking imagine how that happened, but I heard one shot.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard one shot, and honestly, like, I opened up the gun, I checked the rest of them, only one of these was gone, and the rest were fine.
And to highlight that just a little bit more, a source previously told People magazine that the Russ crew had a particular issue since a strike to address unsafe working conditions apparently never happened. And this source told People magazine, quote, "They all made it clear they didn't feel safe and that they had to spend a long time to get to the set. So everyone was tired even before they got there. They were concerned and angry that the proposed union strike that was meant to address these issues never happened." The LA Times reported in 2021 that it had reviewed a text message sent to the unit production manager on the Russ set that said, "We've now had 3 accidental discharges. This is super unsafe." So, of course, it'll be a question about how this evidence will come in, if it'll come in, how either side will use it. But as I mentioned, the fact that the prosecution can no longer use evidence of Alec Baldwin as a producer to prove that he is guilty of involuntary manslaughter, that's a big loss. That's a big loss for them, and it's definitely more of an uphill battle. But as I mentioned, there's some key pieces of video, key pieces of testimony that may hurt Alec Baldwin as well. So we will wait and see what happens here on Sidebar. As we've mentioned, we will continue to follow this case. We'll bring you updates of testimony, things you might have missed during the course of this trial. We're going to be all over it. But for right now, that's all we have for you. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.